The smell of old cedar and dust usually brought me comfort, the familiar scent of the attic, where I kept the 10,000 savings binder. Today, it smelled like impending doom. I sat on the warped floorboards, the late afternoon sun slanting through the tiny window, illuminating the stark reality of the empty bank statement I clutched. My college tuition was due in less than 72 hours, and the account that held my future, the account I had poured every graduation gift, every birthday check, and 3 years of grueling, double-shift diner tips into, now read a definitive, chilling $100 balance. That money wasn't just savings, it was a promise. A promise I made to myself to be the first in my family to get a real degree, to escape the cyclical poverty our town was steeped in. My dream school, the one with the architecture program that made my hands twitch with excitement, needed that final installment. My stomach lurched, a sickening cold wave washing over me. This couldn't be a mistake. Not $10,000. I descended the creaking stairs, my mind already running through the possibilities. A clerical error, a new bank fee. My immediate suspicion, however, landed with the weight of a stone in my gut. Sarah, my older sister. Sarah's life had always been characterized by a certain entitled carelessness, a trait my parents, particularly my mother, seemed to indulge as an endearing quirk. She was the creative spirit, the one who needed room to breathe, which usually translated into needing a room paid for, a car replaced, or a large unexplained sum of money to fund her latest, inevitably short-lived, artistic endeavor. While I was clocking out at 2 a.m. with grease stains on my apron, Sarah was at home, usually scrolling on a new, expensive phone, lamenting the lack of inspiration in her life. My parents had always been subtly, yet undeniably in her corner. When I won the scholarship to the local community college, they were proud but tempered. When Sarah flunked out of cosmetology school, my mother bought her a ticket to find herself in Bali. My 10,000 fund was a point of pride for me. Something I kept rigorously separate and private, precisely because I knew it was the only thing I had that was truly mine. The thought of sharing it, or worse, losing it to Sarah's financial black hole, had always been my greatest fear. I found my mother, Clara, in the kitchen, humming softly while chopping vegetables. The scent of garlic was a jarring contrast to the tension suffocating my chest. "Mum," I started, my voice tight and thin, "I need to talk to you about the college money." She didn't look up immediately. "Oh, honey, don't stress. You've worked so hard. It's all going to work out." "No, Mom. I think something's wrong. The account is empty. Completely or empty. Did you move it, invest it?" I tried to keep the rising hysteria out of my tone. Clara finally stopped chopping. Her movements became slow, almost deliberate, as she put the knife down. She turned, and the look on her face wasn't one of shock or confusion, but of guilty resignation. "Sweetheart," she sighed, folding her arms, "It's not empty." "Well, not exactly empty. It's being used right now." My breath hitched. "Used? Used by who? For what?" "Mum, tuition is due." She avoided my gaze, looking instead at the peeling wallpaper. "It's Sarah, darling. She just had a small crisis with her rent, and she really needed to pay for that new photography course, or she was going to lose her deposit. It was a one-time thing, she promises. She'll pay it back as soon as her gallery show takes off." The world seemed to tilt. Rent, photography course. That was not a crisis, it was the purchase of a new fantasy. Mitre 10,000, the culmination of 3 years of sacrifice, gone in a puff of smoke to finance my sister's latest self-indulgent whim. $10,000 is not a small crisis. "Mom," I managed, my voice now shaking with a fury I hadn't known I possessed. "That was my tuition, my future. Did she even ask me? Did either of you think to call me?" "Well, you know how sensitive Sarah is," my mother said, shifting her weight, slipping immediately into her defensive mode. "She was so stressed, and she didn't want to worry you. She knows you'd make a fuss. She said she'd pay it back before school started, but things just got complicated. Your father and I, we signed for it, yes. We thought, well, you're so responsible, honey. You'll figure something out, you always do." The last line was delivered as a form of praise, but it landed on me like a physical blow. "You're so responsible, you'll figure it out." In their eyes, my responsibility wasn't a virtue. It was a convenient trait they could exploit. Safety net for Sarah's irresponsibility. They were betting my entire future on my ability to pick up the pieces, while actively handing the foundation over to the person who would inevitably drop it. The anger was so intense it felt cold, chilling the hot tears that threatened to fall. I pushed them back. Crying would only give them ammunition, validating their view that I was overly sensitive or making a fuss. "Where is she?" I asked, my voice flat, almost unrecognizable. "She went out with some friends," Mom mumbled, clearly uncomfortable with my sudden silence. "She needed a little celebration after all that stress." "A celebration," I repeated, the word tasting like ash. My mother tried to place a hand on my arm, a belated attempt at comfort, but I flinched away. "Please listen to me," Clara pleaded softly. "Your father and I will try to." "No," I cut her off, my gaze finally locking onto hers, and this time the look in my eyes made her step back. "You've done enough. Don't worry about trying to fix this. You already made your choice, and I understand it completely now." In that moment, standing in the bright kitchen, the sound of the world outside, cars, birds, distant laughter, seemed to fade. The reality wasn't the loss of the money, it was the total collapse of my perception of my family. The realization that they didn't just favor Sarah, they actively betrayed me to facilitate her failure because they were certain I could survive it. My pain was a manageable inconvenience to them. I turned and walked away from the kitchen, not to my room, but straight out the back door. The sun was setting, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and purple. The sting of the betrayal was a blinding force, but with it came a chilling clarity. I was truly completely on my own. My path to college was gone, and with it, my last tie to the family I thought I had. I walked until my legs ached, until the streetlights came on, finally stopping at a desolate park bench. I didn't cry. Instead, I pulled out my phone and accessed the security camera feed I had secretly set up in the living room a few months ago, convinced Sarah was stealing small items. I scrolled back 3 weeks, the day the withdrawal was made. I watched the low-quality video, Sarah sitting at the dining room table with a glass of wine, happily signing the withdrawal slip. My mother was standing over her, smiling, handing her the pen. And then, Sarah leaned back, laughing, raising her glass to my mother. The audio was muffled, but I could hear it perfectly, the words that would become the fuel for everything that followed. "Relax, Mom," Sarah slurred, a triumphant smirk plastered on her face. "He's such a predictable bore. He was just going to save it anyway. Honestly, he doesn't deserve it." Cheers to not being boring. The laughter that followed was the turning point. It was no longer about 10,000 sound. It was about contempt, entitlement, and the absolute destruction of my worth in their eyes. The cold fury I felt in Act 2 was nothing compared to the icy, calculated resolve that settled over me now. The promise of college was broken, but a new, steel-hard conviction took its place. They wanted me to figure it out. Fine. I would figure out how to give them exactly what they deserved. The debt wasn't just financial, it was emotional. And I was going to collect. The night of the betrayal, I didn't sleep. The words, "He doesn't deserve it, cheers to not being boring," played on an endless, corrosive loop in my head. I was no longer the responsible, worried sister. I was a scientist in a lab, and the problem to be solved was not how to get the money back, but how to dismantle the dynamic that allowed the betrayal to happen. My immediate survival instincts kicked in, overriding the despair. The first step was to secure my future without the 10,000, and the second was to understand the precise mechanics of the theft. I went to the diner that morning not to quit but to beg. I met with Maria, the owner, a tough but fair woman who had mentored me for years. With my heart pounding, I let out the catastrophic truth. My college fund was gone, taken by my sister, and I needed the tuition now to hold my spot. I didn't ask for a loan, I asked for all my accrued vacation pay, sick leave, and 2 months' salary in advance, in exchange for signing a contract to work every single shift. Doubles, weekends, holidays, for the next 6 months. Maria looked at me, not with pity, but with a hard assessment. "You're trading your life for a degree, kid. Are you sure?" "I'm sure," I said, my voice steel. "'Cause this degree is the only thing that gets me out, and my sister will never have the satisfaction of knowing she stopped me." Maria agreed. It was a crippling amount of work, but it bought me the time and the funds. The university accepted the payment 2 days before the deadline. I was in. The first battle was won, but the war for justice was far from over. My focus immediately shifted to Sarah. I needed irrefutable proof. Not just for my own satisfaction, but to ensure that if she ever tried to pull this or something worse again, I would be prepared. My cold investigation began with my own parents' house, which was still technically my home base. I started by casually asking my mother about the timeline. So, Sarah really only took the money 3 weeks ago, right? Just for the rent emergency. Wes, honey, just the rent, she insisted too quickly. The landlord was going to evict her. It was that urgent. This was the first crack in the facade. Sarah hated the apartment complex she was in and had been bragging about finding a new, much pricier loft downtown 6 weeks ago. I knew the dates didn't align. Over the next few days, I became a ghost in the house, observing Sarah. She was radiant, dismissive of me, and openly splurging. I saw her order a new top of the line DSLR camera, two 500 expense, and a series of designer dresses for her gallery opening which hadn't even been scheduled yet. The rent crisis story was a flimsy cover. The opportunity came one rainy afternoon. Sarah was out and my parents were visiting friends. I went straight to Sarah's room. It felt wrong, but the memory of her smirk made me ruthless. I was looking for tangible evidence of how the 10,000 was spent and, more importantly, proof of premeditation. In her closet, behind a stack of pretentious art books, I found a small, locked metal box. I knew immediately this was the key. Instead of trying to pick the lock, I remembered Sarah's habit of using the same, sentimental password for everything, the name of her childhood cat. Prince. The lock clicked open. Inside, I found a sheaf of documents. They weren't just receipts. They were a roadmap of the betrayal, a rental lease agreement for the new loft, signed 2 weeks before the fund was withdrawn, requiring a massive security deposit. Receipts for the expensive camera gear and 2 first-class plane tickets, a spontaneous inspiration trip to Lisbon with her boyfriend, and the document that made my blood run ice cold, a handwritten promissory note to my parents. It was dated a month ago, detailing a 5,000 initial loan from them, but then it stopped, scratched out. In its place, a second fully executed document, a form from the bank, pre-filled with my account numbers, signed by my parents, granting Sarah temporary, specific withdrawal access to my college fund. The cruelest detail was the memo line on the bank form: withdrawal for emergency purposes and rental deposit. It wasn't an impulse. My parents had knowingly signed a document allowing the theft, and Sarah had specifically targeted the $10,000 for her new luxury lifestyle, months in the planning. The rent crisis story wasn't just a lie to me, it was the lie they told the bank together. I took pictures of every single document, placing the box back exactly as I found it. I had my evidence. My realization wasn't just that they betrayed me, but that they didn't believe I would fight back. They banked on my responsibility in silence. They thought the 10,000 was a small price for my emotional stability and Sarah's fleeting happiness. That evening, I sent one simple, anonymous text message to Sarah's boyfriend, who was notoriously financially anxious. Ask Sarah about the Lisbon tickets and the DAR 10,000. She paid for it with money she stole from her sister's tuition fund 3 weeks ago. Check the new loft lease date. I was planting the seed of suspicion in her world, but that wasn't the final move. The final, horrifying piece of the puzzle came when I heard my mother on the phone the next day, talking to a friend about my college acceptance. "Oh, she got into the city university," my mother chirped, sounding relieved. "But don't worry, she's so independent. She took out some big loans and is working like a dog. Honestly, it's probably better for her development this way. Sarah needs the money more right now." That was the final, agonizing emotional escalation. My parents didn't see me as a victim. They saw me as a martyr for Sarah's comfort. They believed my suffering was good for me. I closed my eyes, the rage now morphing into a powerful, quiet resolve. They wanted me to be independent. Fine. I would be completely, financially and emotionally independent. And when I was untouchable, I would show them the true cost of their choice. I now had the evidence, the motivation, and the means to survive. I was ready for confrontation. 2 weeks later, I was living entirely out of a shared dorm room near the City University campus, working the night shifts, and focused solely on my studies and my simmering anger. My parents called occasionally, their tone a practiced mix of false concern and thinly veiled relief that I handled it. Sarah, predictably, hadn't called at all, too busy with her new lifestyle. I needed to confront them, but it couldn't be a private, tearful argument in the kitchen that they could easily dismiss. It needed to be public, irrefutable, and humiliating. The annual Family Foundation Gala was 2 days away. It was a mandatory charity dinner hosted by my wealthy maternal aunt, Eleanor, an event where my parents consistently put on a facade of successful, tight-knit domestic bliss. Crucially, Aunt Eleanor was the administrator of the small, residual trust fund left by my grandmother, the last piece of family money that could potentially be loaned to Sarah. The gala was the stage. I spent the day of the gala not prepping a dress, but compiling my evidence, the photos of the fraudulent bank formed, the receipts for Sarah's extravagant purchases, and most damningly, the audio clip from the surveillance camera of Sarah's triumphant cheers to not being boring. Confession. I transcribed everything into a crisp, professionally formatted document titled The Cost of Favoritism, a Case Study in Financial Betrayal. I arrived at the glittering hotel ballroom late, wearing a simple, dark dress I'd found secondhand. My parents, Clara and Robert, were immediately flustered to see me. They were mid-conversation with a major donor and rushed over, their faces masks of panic. "What are you doing here?" my mother hissed, pulling me aside into a hallway alcove. "We thought you were studying." "We didn't even buy you a ticket. I came for the main course," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "The truth." "Don't be dramatic," my father warned, his hand gripping my elbow. "This isn't the time for your emotional outbursts." "I am not emotional, Dad. I am calculating," I countered, pulling away. I walked directly toward the main table where Aunt Eleanor sat, surrounded by the family's most respected and financially connected figures. Sarah was there too, looking glamorous in one of her new designer dresses, laughing loudly, perfectly embodying the entitlement I was about to crush. I stopped by the table, drawing immediate attention. I didn't cry. I spoke in a clear, carrying voice, loud enough to cut through the polite dinner murmur. "Aunt Eleanor," I began, placing the evidence folder gently on the white tablecloth. "I apologize for interrupting the evening, but I have something urgent the whole family needs to know about." My mother rushed forward, her face white. "Darling, please. This is not the place for family business." "It is family business, Mom. It's about our 10,000 theft." I looked directly at Sarah, who froze, her smile melting into a look of sheer terror and rage. "Sarah didn't just borrow my college fund," I stated, addressing Aunt Eleanor and the table directly. "She and my parents conspired to take it. They used the pretense of a fictional rent emergency to convince the bank to allow them to sign a withdrawal. Months after Sarah had already leased a luxury apartment and booked an international vacation, they lied to the bank and they lied to me." The room plunged into a suffocating silence. All eyes were on our table. Sarah jumped up, spilling her wine. "You have no proof. You're just jealous, you pathetic little liar." "On the contrary, Sarah," I said, reaching into my pocket and pulling out my phone. "I have everything." I hit play. The muffled audio recording of Sarah's voice, amplified by my phone's speaker, filled the hushed ballroom. "He's such a predictable bore. He was just going to save it anyway. Honestly, he doesn't deserve it. Cheers to not being boring." The word, deserve, hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. My father stammered. "That's not. It's edited. It's a misunderstanding." "It's the truth," I said, my gaze passing over my father's pathetic attempt to save face and landing on my mother, whose eyes were filled with tears of shame, not sorrow for me, but shame for being caught. "And I have the dated bank forms and the signed lease agreements that prove the premeditated fraud right here." I tapped the folder. Aunt Eleanor, a woman who valued reputation above all else, slowly picked up the folder. Her face, usually serene, tightened with cold disbelief as she looked at the documents. "Clara, Robert." Eleanor's voice was low, lethal. "Is this true? You allowed your daughter to commit fraud against her own sibling." My mother just stood there, silently sobbing into her hands. My father mumbled in incoherent denial. Sarah was openly yelling, but her screams were drowned out by the rising, horrified whispers of the guests. The confrontation reached its peak when Sarah realized she was ruined. She lunged toward the table, trying to snatch the folder and my phone. I sidestepped her. She missed, tripped, and went sprawling, a pathetic, dramatic mess, at the feet of Aunt Eleanor, who looked down on her with utter contempt. "I didn't steal it," Sarah screamed, tears and mascara running down her face. "I'm the favorite. I needed it. He has student loans. He'll be fine." That was the turning point. Her final defense was the ultimate confirmation of her entitlement and my parents' betrayal. I looked at my sister. No pity in my eyes. Then I looked at my parents, realizing the power dynamic was shattered forever. I was no longer the exploited child. I was the one holding the evidence, the one exposing their ugly secrets in front of their most valuable peers. I took the folder back from a stunned Aunt Eleanor. I didn't do this for the money. I did it for justice, I said, addressing the room one last time. And I'm not asking for it back. I bought my own future. This story ends tonight. I turned and walked out of the ballroom, leaving the silence, the broken glass, and the shattered reputation of my family in my wake. My emotional shift was completed. The pain was gone, replaced by the profound, cold satisfaction of the reckoning. I had collected my debt. The fallout from the family foundation gala was immediate and brutal. The next morning, Aunt Eleanor, who served on the university's board of trustees and held considerable sway in the city's business circles, didn't call my parents. She called her lawyer. The bank's internal review, triggered by the commotion and the evidence I presented, quickly found irregularities with the notarization of the temporary withdrawal form, especially given my mother's status as a co-signer on a joint account that wasn't hers. While they didn't press full charges due to the family connection, the bank revoked my mother's signing privileges and initiated an internal audit on the branch manager who processed the questionable document. The financial world of my parents, which had always been about appearances, suddenly became very real and very scrutinized. The atmosphere at the house, which I only visited briefly to collect my remaining belongings, was one of icy silence and simmering resentment. My parents tried to demand an apology, not for the betrayal, but for the humiliation I had caused. You destroyed your sister's reputation. My father said, eyes red with stress. The donors think we're common thieves. You are common thieves, Dad, I replied, calmly packing a box of books. You stole my future to pay for Sarah's fleeting vacation. I simply presented the facts to the public. You built this reputation, I just pointed out the cracks. My mother, usually the emotional manipulator, was strangely subdued, sitting in a chair and staring blankly. The shame had settled deep. I left the house that day, taking nothing sentimental, only the practical necessities, and cut all non-essential contact. My focus was purely on my studies and my job. The family was a closed chapter. Meanwhile, Sarah's situation, which I tracked through social media and overheard calls with distant relatives, began its rapid, predictable descent. The Lisbon trip was cut short by a massive fight with her boyfriend, who, after receiving my anonymous text and confirming the lie about the college fund, realized Sarah's financial instability was deliberate and pathological. He broke up with her, demanding repayment for half the expenses. Suddenly alone and without her boyfriend's financial cushion, Sarah faced the reality of the luxury loft lease. Without the income from the boyfriend and the steady stream of money from my parents, who were now financially paralyzed and terrified of further scrutiny, she couldn't afford the rent. A month later, she tried to sell the expensive camera equipment I had exposed, only to realize most of it was highly specialized and had depreciated instantly. Her gallery opening, which had been so central to her identity, quietly fizzled out because she couldn't afford the venue deposit. The ultimate consequence arrived 3 months into my new life. Aunt Eleanor, disgusted by the financial deceit and favoritism, and citing my parents' gross moral judgment, removed my mother and father as executors of the small family trust, replacing them with a neutral third-party attorney. This trust was the only thing standing between my parents and true, long-term financial vulnerability, and they had gambled it away for Sarah's fleeting happiness. The real emotional consequence was the realization that my parents still hadn't learned. They didn't blame Sarah for her self-destructive entitlement, they blamed me for exposing it. I was at the library studying late when my mother called, her voice tight with suppressed anger. "Happy birthday, honey. But you need to know, Sarah is in serious trouble. She missed rent, and she's facing eviction. You need to call Aunt Eleanor and tell her you lied at the gala. You have to save her, or she'll be living on the street." I told the truth, Mom, and this is not my problem, I said without emotion. "But you're her sister. We're your family," she wailed, resorting back to guilt. "You made your choice the day you signed a fraudulent form to steal my future," I stated, my voice a dull monotone. "You chose her. Now, you live with the consequences of that choice." I hung up, the words ringing with absolute finality. The only thing I felt was the quiet, steely resolve of an independent survivor. Their distress was escalating, but it no longer held power over me. I had secured my education, and in doing so, I had secured my emotional freedom. The stage was set for the final, ultimate denial of their toxicity. 3 years later, I was no longer an overworked student. I was a junior architect at a prestigious firm downtown, a position that demanded everything but paid handsomely. My life was defined by my own merit and hard work, not by the chaos of my family. I had successfully minimized my contact with them to an annual, emotionless holiday text. Sarah, meanwhile, had predictably failed to secure a stable life. She bounced between precarious gig jobs, her debt ballooned. And she was now living back home with my parents, a grown woman dependent on the broken system they created. My parents, their own finances strained by the loss of the trust fund, and my father's early retirement due to work stress, were desperately trying to keep their own house afloat. The moment for my final, calculated move arrived with a thick envelope addressed to me at my office. It was from the bank, a notice regarding the family home, informing all co-signers that the property was entering foreclosure proceedings due to 3 months of missed mortgage payments. My name was on the notice because, years ago when I was 18, my parents had coerced me into signing a document they called a standard legal formality, which I now knew was a contingency co-signer agreement for a refinancing deal. I was legally liable. I immediately called my attorney, whose fees I could now easily afford. He confirmed my liability, but also noted that if I could settle the outstanding balance and fees before the public auction, I could legally take ownership of the house, as my parents' and Sarah's equity was already wiped out by debt. The sum needed was significant, but not impossible for me. The next day I drove to the family home. The lawn was overgrown, the paint peeling, physical mirror of their collapsing lives. I found my parents and Sarah in the kitchen, surrounded by piles of overdue bills. They looked defeated, old, and broken. The air was thick with the smell of desperation. My mother looked up, her eyes pleading. "Honey, you got the bank letter, please. You have to help us. Your father is sick with worry. We need 50,000 to save the house. It's all we have left." My father added, "We know we messed up with the college fund, but this is different. This is everything. You're successful now. It's just a loan." Sarah watched me silently, her usual smirk replaced by a terrified blankness. I took a deep breath, placing my leather briefcase on the kitchen table. I didn't come here to argue or to forgive. I came to settle a debt. I opened the briefcase and slid the full, professional binder toward them. Inside were documents, the original, detailed statement of my Thars 10,000 fund, marked as stolen capital. Beneath it was a cashier's check for the exact amount needed to settle the bank's foreclosure claim. "The Dar 10,000 you stole 3 years ago forced me into a contract with the diner, working 80 hours a week for 6 months. That experience taught me more than any business class, and it is the only reason I am here today." I explained, my voice steady, professional. "You were right, Sarah. I figured it out." I looked at Sarah, repeating her exact words back, not in anger, but in cold finality. "Honestly, you don't deserve this house. You were just going to waste it anyway. I needed this more." I then slid the second document across the table, the new deed of ownership, legally transferring the house solely to my name, effective the following morning when I would pay the bank. "I am not lending you the money," I stated. "I am buying the house at foreclosure value. I settled the debt, making me the new owner. You have 1 week to clear your belongings. I will give you a month of free rent to find an apartment. After that you are tenants and the market rate applies, or you leave." My mother shrieked, my father bellowed a denial, and Sarah finally erupted, launching herself at me.
"You can't do this! This is our home."
"You cruel, cold son of a—" I didn't flinch. I let her rage, then spoke calmly over her hysteria. "3 years ago you laughed when you took my future. Now I have taken your past. This is the cost of that doll 10,000. My ultimate act of revenge wasn't financial ruin. It was the ultimate, complete reversal of power. I had become the responsible one who held all the cards, forcing them to depend on the very person they had discarded." I watched the realization dawn on their faces. They had permanently lost their home, their control, and the ability to hurt me. I stood up, closing my briefcase. "Won't be contacting you again unless it's through my lawyer." I walked out the door and never looked back. I used the house as an investment property, turning the symbol of my childhood pain into a foundation for my absolute, self-made success. The debt was finally settled, not with blood, but with iron-clad justice.